nothing more than just being outdoors. I can never get enough sunshine soaked into my bones. Just like the big old roots of this big old tree. Hard to believe it started as a bitty little seed over 70 years ago. In my future, when I'm a bit over 70, I'm going to publish my 7th book called Little Town on the Prairie in 1941. That means the book will be 70 years old in the far, far away year of 2011. Oh, well, I reckon I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's start when it's 1881 and I'm a little girl of 14 in my little town of DeSmet, South Dakota. My family survived the horrible blizzard and long winter, and now lots of folks are traveling from the east to settle all over the prairie. New claim shanties keep popping up every few days, and strangers keep driving through town on wagons big and small. Ma says we'll get acquainted with our new neighbors, but not till the spring work is done. In the afternoons, after our morning chores, I like to take my sister Mary for walks so she can smell the flowers we pick and hear the bugs rustling in the buttercups and the sheep sorrel. You see, my sister Mary became blind when her scarlet fever robbed her of her sight. Oh, she's still lighthearted and serene and good. Sometimes she's so good I can hardly stand it. Once I told her goodness made me so angry I used to want to slap her. She said, "Oh, how awful. Do you want to slap me now?" I said, "No, never." Mary smiled and said, "Are you just being gentle to me because I'm blind?" I replied, "Honestly, no. I hardly think of your blindness anymore. I'm just glad you're my sister. I wish I could be more like you. I don't know how you can be so good." In Iowa, there's a college for the blind that Mary wants to attend, but Pa doesn't have enough money yet. Every night we pray that Mary's dreams come true. When I get old enough, I want to teach school so that I can earn money to help pay for Mary's tuition. So the thought of living without her while she's gone gives me a big old lump right here. One day when Pa came home from working, he asked me, "How'd you like to work in town, Half Pint?" I was so surprised I nearly spit my milk out all over my other sisters, Carrie and Grace. What in the world kind of work might there be in town for a girl besides the hotel? Well, Pa said it was a new dry goods store and that Mr. Clancy could use me to help with the hand sewing on men's shirts. He said they even have this newfangled contraption called a sewing machine, where you pump a pedal with your feet to make the needle move. Can you imagine? But I didn't want to work in town with complete strangers. I said yes, though, because I couldn't pass up a chance to earn money for Mary. So the very next morning, after I brought in the water and milked our cow Ellen, Pa and I walked into town to get work by 7. When we got to Main Street, I saw all the new buildings in town and a new board sidewalk in front of them. There were horses and oxen tied to posts, but the prairie still covered all the vacant lots. In fact, there were still some old haystacks and rotting manure piles. Pa's office building and stable were right on the corner of Main and 2nd. He left me with Mr. Clancy, who introduced me to Mrs. White. Mrs. White pulled out a bunch of pins from her mouth and barked, "I hope you're a good fast sewer, young lady. Can you baste to make good firm buttonholes?" Oh, I had such a trembly feeling, but I managed to whisper, "Yes, ma'am." All day long, Mrs. White kept yelling at me to hurry up, that we were behind. "Faster, Laura, faster!" The only nice thing she ever said to me was that my buttonholes beat out hers. Mr. and Mrs. Clancy argued loudly in the next room, and I kept pricking my fingers on the needle. By the end of the day, my neck and shoulders hurt something terrible, and I could hardly feel my legs. At dinner that night, Pa asked me how my first day of working for pay went. I just said, "Fine." Mrs. White spoke well of my buttonholes. When the 4th of July came that year, we had a big celebration in town with firecrackers and horse racing and lemonade. I almost couldn't sleep the night before. Mom made sandwiches, and my sisters and I got to wear our very best Sunday hair ribbons. Carrie was buttoning up her calico, and she couldn't quite reach the top buttons, so she asked for me to help. I went over and noticed she buttoned all her buttons outside in. "Silly, you can't wear your buttons all turned in." Mary looked at me and said, "Well, if they're turned out, the buttons keep grabbing at my hair. My braids catch on them." I fixed her buttons and said, "Well, you'll just have to stand it till you're old enough to put your hair up." Carrie then asked me if I thought Pa would buy his firecrackers. I knew he couldn't afford them, so I just said, "Oh, it's silly to spend money just to make a little noise." When the celebration started, there was a man reciting the Declaration of Independence. I knew it by heart, of course, so I mouthed the words right along with him. It gave me such a solemn, glorious feeling. When the buggy races started, I was rooting for a team of beautiful brown Morgan horses. Pa said they were being driven by Almanzo Wilder. Oh, he had his hat pushed back on his head, and he looked cheerful and confident. I thought he looked mighty handsome too, but I didn't say so to anybody. He ended up winning the race in $5 whole. My knees were all wobbly and I discovered I'd been holding my breath when he crossed the finish line. Then in August, when the corn was taller than me, one day in the field there was a great big swarm of blackbirds. They were eating the corn. Oh, I could feel the wind from their beating wings and I was afraid they were going to peck or claw at me. I didn't run though because we had to save the corn. So with my heart racing, I took off my sunbonnet and started swiping at them. Oh, but it didn't do any good. There were just too many. So I gathered up as many ears of corn as I could in my apron and ran home. Oh, by the time I got home, though, and Pa ran back with his shotgun, the corn crop and most of the oats were ruined. How would Mary get to college now? I was so sad, but it did make me feel a little bit better to eat blackbird pie for many days afterward. And Pa told me, a flock of pesky blackbirds can't stop us. And he was right. By the end of the summer, we had enough money to send Mary to college. I felt proud that the $9 I made that summer at Mr. Clancy's also helped. I don't think I've ever been so sad as the day I had to say goodbye to Mary. I told her I'd miss her, and I hugged her. I almost didn't let go. She told me that if it wasn't for me and all the help I gave her with her studies and the money I contributed, she may not be going at all. I couldn't say anything else. I was too choked up. Now, I didn't cry, though. Well, not until Mary pulled away in the wagon with Ma and Pa. I'd never felt such a stillness. It wasn't the stillness of the prairie, though. It was a stillness right here in the pit of my stomach. I tried to remember how truly happy I was for Mary and not dwell on the lonesome ache of missing her. I renewed my vow that when I turned 16, I would get my teacher's certificate to earn money to keep Mary in college. When the first day of school came that year, I had 2 surprises. One was that our new teacher was Miss Wilder, Almanzo's sister. The other was that Nellie Olson walked into the schoolhouse, and she was late. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I couldn't believe she moved here to South Dakota from Plum Creek, Minnesota, which is where I'd met her. See, Nellie used to make fun of Mary and me for being country girls. Her father was a shopkeeper, so she thought that made her a better person. She was even mean to Jack, our old faithful bulldog. And now here Nellie stood with her nose still in the air and her mouth still prim and prissy. She went up to Miss Wilder, smiled her fake smile, and said, "I would like a back seat, if you please." And then she walked over to me, leaned in, and whispered, "Get up and give me your seat." Well, I didn't budge. I just stared back at her. Eventually, she backed away and made another girl move. Later, I heard her tell the teacher for the record book that she was living on a claim north of town. I smiled to myself and thought, well, now Nellie herself is a country girl. At recess, the other girls and I tried to stay away from Nellie, but she just had to grab all the attention. She said loudly, "I really don't know if we'll like it here. My family's from the east and aren't used to such rough country and rough people." I tried to bite my tongue, but I just couldn't. "You come from Minnesota, the same place we did." "Oh, that was only for a little while. We really come from New York." "Well, then we all come from the east. Come on, let's get out of the shade and into the sunshine." "My goodness, no. I may have to live in this rough country for a spell, but I shan't let it ruin my delicate pale complexion and hands." "Fine. I shan't ruin your precious time in the shade," and we all walked away. I suppose I should feel sorry for Nellie, but I just don't. I wish she had stayed in Plum Creek. Aw, there I go again thinking bad thoughts. I will be good. No matter how hateful Nellie Olson is, I will be good. Or at least I'll try to be. Carrie and I talked about Nellie on the way home for our noon dinner, and I told her it would be hard, but she had to think good thoughts too. Carrie looked at me and said, "Well, I'll try, but she's such a hypocrite." A what? "You know, a hypocrite. Someone who says one thing but does another." "Oh, a hypocrite. Silly Carrie. I can't say I disagree with you, though, that's for certain." When we got back to school, it was time for spelling. When it was my turn, I had to go up to the blackboard and write cataracts, separate, and exasperates 50 times each. And every time I did, I thought how much Nellie Olson exasperates me, and I wish we still lived in separate towns. Carrie must have told Ma what happened that day with Nellie, because on my pillow that night, there was a note. It said, If wisdom's ways you wisely seek, 5 things observe with ease, of whom you speak, to whom you speak, and how and when and where, your loving mother. My cheeks felt flushed, and I vowed once more to be as good as Mary the next time I was around Nellie. Though, I reckon even Mary would find it hard to be good around Nellie. In November, I was so proud to receive my first set of my very own name cards. They were little pink cards with roses and cornflowers across the top, and my name printed below, Laura Elizabeth Ingalls. I was admiring them one day on the way to school when all of a sudden young Mr. Wilder pulled up in his buggy.
Oh, would you like a ride to the schoolhouse? You'll get there faster.
Oh, I was speechless, but I shook my head yes, and he took my hand and helped me into the buggy. We rode along in silence for a bit, and then I said, I'm Laura Ingalls. Oh, how silly of me. Of course he knows who I am. But he just smiled and said, I know. And there wasn't any contempt in his voice at all. In fact, he had a very nice voice. When I found mine again, I said, well, I was only saying so because I just got my name cards.
Is that so? Mine are just plain cards.
And he handed me one. It was a little white card that said Almanzo James Wilder. I didn't know what to do with the card. It seemed rude to hand it back, but I don't know if he meant for me to keep it. So I just sort of held it up in the air, hoping he'd take it back if he wanted. When he didn't, I panicked and I said, do you want your card back?
Oh, that's all right. You can keep it if you want.
Oh, why, thank you. Would you like one of mine? And he said he would, so I handed him one and thanked him for the ride. He said, don't mention it, and there was a little twinkle in his eyes. His dark blue eyes. I only noticed because we were sitting so close. At school, everyone saw me with Almanzo in the buggy, so of course I was teased mercilessly at recess. Mary Powers even asked me if I planned on dancing with him at the Ladies' Aid Society Dime Sociable. I simply said, I don't much like dime sociables. I'd rather have the dime, and walked away. When winter came that year, my thoughts of Mary became more bittersweet. It was our first Christmas without her, and it was like a little bit of joy was missing from the household. Carrie received a china doll, Ma a thimble, Pa a silk necktie, and Carrie and I both received a wonderful book of our own. The very best present, however, was a letter from Mary. She said she was doing well with all of her studies and learning to read and write Braille. We took turns reading that letter over and over all Christmas Day and night. Winter came and went, and so did another spring, summer, and fall. In the winter of 1882, I was now 15. It was Christmas Eve, the day after our school exhibition. All of a sudden, there was a knock on the door, and in came Mr. Boast from the school board. He said I had done so well at the exhibition that he wanted me to be the teacher at the new school he was opening 12 miles away. My heart leapt, but I said, I won't be 16 for over a month. Mr. Boast looked at me and said, now, Laura, you should only tell your age if someone asks you. The question is, will you teach school if the superintendent grants you a certificate? Well, I'd only be able to come home during the summers. 12 miles was much too far to travel. But the money I'd make, $20 a month, would mean that Mary would be able to come home during the summers. Why, yes, I'd be glad to teach at your new school. And then there was another knock on the door, and in came Mr. Williams, from the superintendent from the school board. He said, are you the young lady who wants a teacher's certificate? No need to give you the examination. I saw you answer all the questions last night. But I do see your pencil and slate are on the table, so we may as well go through the motions. So we sat at the table and I took the examination. There was reading, arithmetic, writing, grammar, history, geography, and I read the oration on the death of Caesar. When I was done, he took out a blank sheet of paper, spread it out on Pa's desk, and filled it out with our pen and ink. After he left, we all gathered around to read it. Pa, I'm a school teacher. I have a teacher's certificate. Pa looked at me and said,
well, that's pretty fine for a 15-year-old.
And he tried to say something else but couldn't, so he just hugged me. Pa, do you really think I can teach school?
I do, Laura. I'm sure of it.
And pretty soon I became sure of it, too. My newfound confidence did not change the fact that I would miss my family very much, and I was nervous about this new chapter of my life. Well, nervous and excited. You see, everything I've told you today has led me up to this, my very first day of teaching school. Well, I better go inside now and get ready for all my new students, but thank you so much for listening to me. You've helped to relax me, and telling you my little stories has reminded me that no town is too little for big hopes and dreams. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Right on time. It's over. 15.
School?
I don't know. After it turns 15:15, I'm turning it off.
The school bell's ringing.